get this started. We'll go around the room and see if we can find some guests visiting Rotarians here. I'd actually like to welcome Brandy back. It's been a while.
How immature.
Who do we have in the back here?
Hi, I'm Tasha Babbage. I'm technically no longer a guest because I'm this year's Vice President of North Bay Rotary.
Yes!
Yana Valachavic.
Welcome.
I have my mom, Nina, here. Jessica and Monica, past members of North Bay Rotary.
So let me start with an update from tomorrow. Got a mouthful. All right.
Nobody's here.
So 2 weeks ago there was the rafting trip organized by the district from Northern California, and this is all of the exchange students from this year, and it was a very fantastic weekend. We went in Willow Creek on the river, we do a rafting trip, and we spent all the weekend together. We camped in a beautiful place, and yeah, that was a very good weekend. Then it was last weekend we went to Trinidad. So
2 weekends in a row.
yeah, 2 weekends. I don't remember. It was in Trinidad on the beach. We did a campfire and we had a beautiful sunset. It was very cool. And yeah, it's not this picture. This one. I don't remember like a small surf. You do on a small wave. It was very funny. Skimboard, yeah. And so on Wednesday there is the Sea Scouts in Eureka, and the last Wednesday I went with Steve and a French student from AFS, Ines, and we sailed on the Junay, but there is not so much wind, so we just use the engine. And last weekend we went backpacking at Bear Lake in the Trinity House. It was quite hard to go there, but it was very nice and very funny to do.
Thank you.
All right.
So I'm not sure if many of you know that this week was NATS. So one of our very own was in Colorado, getting trained up to be the future governor, 2021 to 2022, I believe. I believe it's his flight back, so he's traveling at the moment, but we'll get an update from him next week with how that trip goes.
What does NAT stand for?
I think it's governor nominee. I don't know what the A is. Actually, I think the A isn't supposed to be included. It's a training session, so. So I literally phonetically spelled
but
it.
for governors.
Yeah. So this coming weekend, we have a reception at the Samoa Peninsula. I think Crystal couldn't make it. But an art show celebrating the Samoa Peninsula, and all these structures are called vaults, and they all had various artists assigned to them. So it'll be an interesting show out in the dunes. So come check that out. 5 to 7 on the 7th. And Romy, would you like to?
All right, I would love to. I just want to
Give thank yous again. First off, our club donated $1,000. Thank you for making that happen, and that was wonderful. I want to say thank you to Terry, Tammy, Jeff Stebbins, Sarah, AJ, Dick, Sophie, Brian, Jessica, Maggie, Brandy, Craig, Ian, Dustin, Scott, my moms, my uncle, and aunt, my cousins, and all of the people who have decided that they're going to support this effort. I set a goal of our team raising $4,000, and we're at $3,875. Not bad. And unfortunately, I just heard from Randy that it's closed when you try to donate, but of course, they will take your donation on Sunday morning. Yeah. So once again, as I've said before, this is such an important cause. We need positive and compassionate. Boom! We need positive, compassionate, empathetic conversations around mental health issues in our community more than most. And this kind of effort, raising awareness, raising positive support, starting dialogue is one of the most important things that we can do. And so I so appreciate everyone who's part of it. I'm so thankful that our team is we're the second largest fundraiser this year, and this is a super important cause that we need to talk about this weekend, but every day. Reach out to people. If you know that somebody is struggling with a mental health issue, please reach out to them. In my life, the devastating, heartbreaking effect was when somebody didn't believe the seriousness of the situation. So reach out, show love, show compassion for folks who are struggling, and we will make a positive change.
Awesome.
So the following Friday, there is a fundraiser for Zero Waste Humboldt. Events from 6 to 9 and $35 per person. This was a passion project of one of my associates, and Maggie Gainer's also involved. And tickets are for sale. If you're interested in going, they will be available at the Umpqua Bank right up the street, or I can definitely connect you with the tickets. So come to the store.
Can I make a quickie announcement?
Yes.
Just to let you know, tomorrow night is the Trinidad Land Trust benefit, and I have tickets. If you want to know more, see me. Okay? That's all.
And this is a collaboration between some of the clubs. The Planet Humboldt event is taking place the following weekend as well, on the 14th, from 10 to 10. It's an all-day event, and then they have an evening dinner, presentations, and speakers. It's originally created by the Garberville Club, but they've reached out to many other clubs to put it together and at the Sequoia Conference Center. So it's a celebration of Alexander von Humboldt's 250th birthday, and a lot of topics are around the environment and sustainability. So September 14th from 10 to 10.
If I can interrupt for a second?
Sure.
We'll go back to what Romy did. Romy forgot to tell you guys, she really blew that whole thing. It's terrible. No, we need some volunteers at 8 o'clock to help set up, and the ACE box van will show up with tables and chairs and tents. So I need like some able-bodied folks, like 6 at 8.
And it's Sunday, right?
Sunday. Expect it to be totally disorganized when you get there. No one knows what's going on. But we need just like 6 people at 8 a.m. to help set up, basically. Okay, just find me and we'll figure stuff. Grab some tables.
Any volunteers?
No. Right here in the closet, because the McKinleyville Ace is delivering the tables, chairs, and tents. We'll be here at 8 a.m.
So we got 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, just.
There we go.
Woo!
Oh, it's good too. There's a little bit of coffee there somewhere. So,
Somewhere.
thank
It'll
you.
it'll get there at 10, right?
The coffee? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, the fellowship event at the Griffin. This is a September event. This time on the 16th from 4 to 6. And this month we're going to support the Walk to End Alzheimer's Foundation. And it's Make-up Monday, or what was it? There was another name for it.
Fun day.
Monday. So yes, come on the 16th from 4 to 6, and we'll talk Rotary. invite any other Rotarians or any other interested parties who'd like to meet other Rotarians and talk. Let's see, I was going to give Patty an opportunity.
So on September 18th, I may have misspoke last week, but on the 18th, which is a Wednesday, it's a fellowship event to go out on the Matapit and hopefully have a nice sunset cocktail cruise. It's just a 1-hour cruise around the bay, starting at 5:30. And if you want to join in, you just go to that website there and buy your ticket for $10.
And it's really easy to change your ticket from the 11th to the 18th.
Oh shoot, sorry.
Not a problem.
It's September 18th.
Throwing a lot of dates out there, and I wanted to actually throw out a recognition to Steve here to create these table tents for me. So you can see that we have some upcoming programs, some of the upcoming fellowship and if you're interested in a particular committee, all the committee chairs are there, so you know to reach out to you. So thank you, Steve, I appreciate that. And Maggie, you have
All right, we have the Taste of Guatemala coming up on the 27th. If last week you took tickets to sell or to buy, please stop by the table when you leave and let us know how many you have, so we can write that down. If you did take tickets, we have tickets and posters here for you. It's $50. It's a sit-down dinner. It's $50 plus a drink. Sit-down dinner, Guatemalan food, and you'll learn a lot about the project that we're doing. If you're interested, or you know anyone who's interested in going to Guatemala, and this is a good opportunity for them to come and hear about the project. We're going to have a sign-up genius pretty soon. We're going to finalize what we need, and then AJ, I'll work with you to get that up. We do need some volunteers. It will not be as intensive as any of our other events because it's a smaller group, less decorations, less moving parts, fewer moving parts. So it should be a fun event. We're looking for corporate sponsors. If anyone wants to do corporate
What are
sponsors.
the different sponsor levels? I stopped reading your emails on the subject a week ago.
Thanks to Matt. Matt does that. Thanks to Matt, we have 3 sponsorship levels: 250, 500, and 500 you get 2 free tickets, and if you do 1,000 you get 6 free tickets.
I'll do 1,000. Put Remax down for 1,000.
So if Matt's a friend of yours, you may not have to buy a ticket now. So.
Did you mention that you can put it on the card right now?
Oh yeah, that's right. If you need to buy a ticket because you want to make sure you get your ticket, you can put it on we've got the square set up for that. So, and please take a couple tickets. We only need you to each. If everyone sold 2 or 3, we'd be good to go. So, and if you want to join us in our planning meeting, we're meeting at the Griffin on 9/11 or September 11th. All right, I think that's it.
Thanks, Maggie. And Art, you're next.
Have you heard of enough fundraisers? There's yet another one.
Oh, tell us about another one.
This is the Bayside Community Hall that we've been supporting in a big, big way, of course. And particularly I want to give recognition to Scott for his generosity in supporting that community hall. They are having their fall fundraiser, and it's on October the 9th. Tickets are $50. I have tickets to sell if you're interested, so let me know if you're interested.
Can we just leave our decorations up and walk out?
I think there is some kind of a deal we can discuss about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Art. And one last thing to put on your radar is that World Peace Conference in Ontario, Canada, California, January 17th to the 18th. Just something to look forward to down the road. I don't know, Susan, if you want to speak to it again?
It promises to be a really wonderful convention with people from all over the world and many different avenues to pursuing peace. both at home and internationally. So I hope that people will join me in going. What I like is that it's here stateside, so it can just be a quick trip. A quick trip to see Rotarians from all walks of life.
Thank you. And looks like I'll now be able to remove the slides since we do have it on the table tents, but send any recognitions or photos to arcs@gmail.com. So I guess at this moment, I'll introduce our, or Karen, if you don't mind coming up and introducing our program.
So last year at Garden Club meeting, we had this unexpected presentation. It was absolutely fabulous. And Yana Valachavic was the speaker. She talked about home survival in wildfire-prone areas, designing materials and design considerations. Very timely topic last year. And I asked her if she'd be willing to come and talk to us, condense her presentation, and she said yes. So she's here this morning. She's the county director and forest advisor of the University of California Cooperative Extension in Humboldt and Del Norte counties. She's a registered professional forester and forest scientist, and her skills cover a wide set of natural resource fields. Currently, she's the co-lead of the Northern California region of the California Fire Science Consortium and is founding steering committee member of the Northern California Prescribed Fire Council. She's authored several papers in fire behavior in the coastal California forests and in the intersection of fire performance in both home design and landscape design. And so she's been leading the education work since 2017 and helping learn how to build smarter for fire performance, and she helps communities recover from some of these tragic events. So, Yana.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Karen. It's great to see you all. It's nice to be out here at the Sunrise Club. Where's the sun? I happen to live in Arcata, so this is fun to actually do one of these talks at the local level. I've been traveling all over the state. And just to kind of say where the conversation is going, and this is sort of a strange experience for me, I got invited 2 weeks ago to the major insurance conference for the United States with all the top insurance agents in the country trying to figure out how do we protect people, where do we insure people, how do we give good guidance, and how do we kind of lift the fog in this really, devastating topic that affects every single one of us. Like, I still live in a house with a wood shake roof. I've got everything wrong at my house. But I just finished my refinance, and I hopefully will be able to afford that roof and all that stuff. So, my expertise is really in the forestry world and in looking at plants and vegetation communities and helping landowners manage their properties. But I've always had a strong interest in wood products and in design. And years ago, we have a forest products lab in the University of California, and we started doing educational shows about how buildings burn. And you know how people would come? Just about zero. It was the volunteer fire departments and an occasional passionate person, but you could not get a crowd to save your life. People just were not interested. They're like, yeah, this is a problem of somebody else. This is the wildland firefighters issue. It's not my problem. But I think we've all gone through a really serious reality check. And I mean, how many of you were glued every day listening to the news in Paradise or in Santa Rosa? I mean, it was like, it's so tragic. Like, how can you imagine this happening? And I know, living in Arcata under the great, fog bank and next to the Great Pacific Fire Break, which we call the ocean, it's sure that the fire will burn out when it hits the ocean. We can feel sort of, this isn't our issue, right? My house isn't going to burn. This is not something I really need to worry about. But you're not always in Arcata. We all travel everywhere. Some of us have other properties in other places. Most of us have family in California living somewhere in an extremely fire-prone environment. And we have historical record of fires burning to the ocean here. We just saw one 3 years ago up in Brookings. You may remember that there was a wildland fire that had a wind shift and it burned 90,000 acres and it went right to the edge of Brookings. So we have the conditions that are prime. The challenge is, and we have a tremendous volunteer fire department and municipal fire department, and we have CAL FIRE, we have all these resources, but when we're in condition to burn, what's the rest of the state in? They're probably on fire, right? And so you may remember when the Tubbs fire happened that we had a utility line fire that started in Blue Lake. Ours was the first one in the sequence of fires that happened. And we got a bomber right on it, and we got it under control. 4 hours later, Santa Rosa blew up, Red Valley blew up. Had we been out of that sequence, we might not have had the resources here to be able to handle the issues. So I set the context to say that these are real issues for all of us, and there are very specific things that we can do, and it's going to take kind of putting on a different lens when we look at our houses and we look at how we beautify our landscapes and what we do that can make a difference. So this isn't your thing, you can tune out, but I'm pretty passionate about this, and I'm spending a lot of time in Sacramento really trying to fix some of the policy challenges that we have to be able to help people. So I've been through Coffey Park, I've been through the Carr Fire in Redding, I've seen the fire tornado footprint, I've been throughout Paradise. I have a pretty strong sense of what the domino effect is, what the first point of failure is, and kind of what happens along the way. So the first part in this is basically to understand how a home burns from wildfire. Most of us think of it as this giant flaming front that's going to come at us. There's going to be this wall of flames that's just going to engulf our house. The reality is it's probably not like that. And so what I want to show you is there's sort of 3 typical types of exposure. And the first one, what I just described, is where there's direct flame contact, where a fire and its flames do approach the home. And the more common way, however, is embers, little bits of burning vegetation that move long distances, move past your fire breaks, and land on your home and find all the little weak points. So in this case here we've got a broom that's been left outside. That is easily ignitable. It could be a doormat. It could be a way into the house. And so to back up our research, there is a lab in North Carolina where it's big enough that they can start whole buildings and then expose them to different types of fire. And so here's an example of that lab, and you can see these embers being blasted at the house. I don't have an embedded video to show you, but this is really what it looks like when you get a fire that's got a heavy component of wind behind it. And that's when we tend to lose the most homes, is when we have a tremendous amount of wind behind it. So embers are able to find all the weak points. The other situation is something called radiant heat. And if you have a wood stove, you know that if you put something too close to the wood stove, you're drying your socks, they'll start to smoke a little bit, and you can start a fire just from the heat adjacent. So if your neighbor's house catches on fire, the amount of heat that is generated from your neighbor's house, depending how close you are, can engulf your own home by just that radiant heat without actually touching it. So understanding that you can have direct flame contact, you can have a super high heat exposure from your neighbor's house, or you can have these wind-driven bits of vegetation or construction materials once the houses start burning, are sort of the 3 ways that homes are exposed. And you have to think about kind of what is in your situation. If you're in a place where your houses are really close to each other, being aware of radiant heat may be a very important piece. If your home is isolated on a large property, maybe that's less of an issue. And so the embers and the direct flame contact become more important. But what I've been trying to set the stage for is in many cases the landscaping and the vegetation almost doesn't engage. So here's an example from the Angora fire in South Lake Tahoe, where you see all the trees surrounding this house perfectly fine. This wasn't a fire from the inside of the house. This fire happened because embers were able to get inside the house, and the house actually is the most combustible part of the landscape. So you will see classic examples of this in images from Santa Rosa, from Paradise. And so trying to figure out how you armor yourself and harden your home to be able to withstand those embers is really the critical piece that we've been missing. So the points of entry into a house from embers are numerous. So you can imagine where you have a dormer, so a little roof that abuts up, and you've got a wall, and then that little connection point, you've got leaf material that collects there, or needles, or Other materials, so the embers land, and they ignite that material, and your Class A roof here really doesn't have to do much work because the wall itself is not rated to withstand fire. And so then it's fairly easy to penetrate inside the wall and get inside the house. Or you have rain gutters, which we live in a rainy climate. Rain gutters are super important because otherwise your siding will wear prematurely. And so rain gutters can fill with material, and that material can then be ignited by those embers. And what happens is you have your roof and you have your gutter attached, and then you've got your roofing on top, and you've got the gutter, and the fire starts in the gutter and then just goes right underneath your roof. But you need to have the way to solve that issue is to put a piece of metal flashing, which is standard installation now, but there's a lot of homes out there that don't have that little piece of metal flashing, which makes a difference there. We also recommend the installation of non-combustible gutter guards, so not the plastic ones, but the metal ones. They do take some maintenance, but they can help kind of keep that material out. Here's a comparison. This is a plastic gutter, this is a metal gutter. Plastic gutters will melt and detach and then create an exposure to the side of the house. That being said, I still promote metal guards. You can also imagine the fence-to-house connection. This is from Santa Rosa, from Coffey Park, and it's, you know, the small materials catch on fire more easily, and fencing is relatively thin overall. So I'm not, you know, I work in the forest products industry. I love redwood, I love wood products. The solution, though, is to have a metal gate to attach to the house, so that if the fence catches on fire, it doesn't wick it to the house. So you've got a way to break it up. The other main location where embers enter are through ventilation systems. And venting is really important because inside our house we have, you know, hot water and showers, and we cook, and we let all this moisture inside our house, and it has to go somewhere. So if you don't have a ventilation system, then you've got this moisture problem, and then you'll have rot. But what we need is something that's a little bit more like Gore-Tex, where it lets our body heat out and our moisture out, but keeps the rain from coming in. Because what happens is most of us have, this is a gable-in vent, so at the pointy part of the roof, this is the under-eave vents, and most of those have a mesh screen that's a 1/4 inch size and sometimes greater, and that's just really porous. So these little tiny bits of embers can get inside. So these are two pictures taken from inside an attic, and those embers are being thrown at the outside of the house, and you can see these little sparks coming right at you. So depending on what you store in your attic, or depending on the condition of your attic, you have a very susceptible place for material to ignite. So this is the horizon line just for perspective. And you can see that a lot of embers are getting inside that house, just in one frame of an image. So this is probably the most common way that we're losing our homes, is because of our vents and how our vents are designed. The good news is it's possible to change that without a lot of money. So when you're thinking about your structure and its vulnerability, or your friend's structure, or your child's structure, or wherever they live, there's sort of an overwhelming set of issues. And most people, the first thing they want to do is replace their siding. The siding is important, but it's lower on the priority list. The siding just happens to be what we see and what we most orient around with our house. So let me try and decouple where the priorities are. So they're the roof and the roof edge. Number one thing you need to worry about. That roof has so much exposure from the sun. It has to resist the wind. It has to resist all the rain, the hail, maybe snow. And so an old roof has little nooks and crannies and places that things can get in. A tile roof, for example, has all kinds of gaps and little places that need to get plugged up to be able to resist those embers. The next main priority is really the vents, and I'll show you a couple examples of that. And then the third priority is really the defensible space and the vegetation right around the house. After that, once these things are taken care of, we can start talking about the windows, the decking, the siding, and those kind of vulnerabilities. But taking care of those three things is really a huge part of the equation. So the roof being the number one priority, looking at all those places of potential weakness. So the roof surface itself, is it in good shape? Is it time to replace the roof? Is it like my nice redwood shake roof from 1955 that is beautiful, but is not going to withstand anything. Don't come save my house. It's not worth it at that point. Additionally, there's the roof edge and the roof gutters that we're talking about. Maybe you have a ridgeline vent system, maybe you have through roof vents. You know, understanding how these are designed to function and when you have the opportunity, making upgrades is a high recommendation. I don't know that any of our roofing contractors are really up to speed on these issues yet. The codes have changed in 2008 for new construction, but trying to bring our existing housing stock up to standard is the next challenge. And figuring out as a state, how do we incentivize people for doing this? How do we not make it an economic issue where the low income and those that are most vulnerable don't have the resources to handle these things? Because that's what we saw in Paradise, right? Paradise was a retirement community that was established in the 50s, and it really was some of our most vulnerable populations. I mean, it was paradise for them, but their homes were really not designed for the kind of exposures they experienced. So the next priority is the vents, whether they be the through roof vents, the gable-in, foundation, under eave, dryer vents, all these pieces. The way your ventilation system is designed is to create circulation. So the under eave vents become an inlet, they let in cool air in, and then the through roof vents and the gable-in vents are the outlets to let that moist hot air out and be able to manage heat. So you need the whole system to work. And then foundation vents let that moisture from underneath the house and in the soil environment have a way out. So you'll probably notice that when you walk to your house and you look at the vents on your house, they probably have a 1/4 inch size right now. The majority of us are in that current condition. The issue is when you get smaller sizes and you go to paint your house, it's pretty easy to fill a smaller size vent up, and then it seals up with paint, and then you don't have it functioning. So we need to think about how to protect these new vents. And so what we're recommending is an 1/8 inch metal mesh screen. This is the cheap fix, the way to sort of, you can tack that screen up over your existing vent, or you can move to some new technologies. And this is kind of exciting. There's actually been some significant breakthrough in ventilation technology. So this would be a foundation vent. It's about a $25 vent just for price comparison. And what's really neat about it is that you can see there's kind of this honeycomb look amongst it. So there's an aluminum honeycomb that when heat is exposed to it, that aluminum melts and the vent seals up. So basically it has a shut-off mechanism that can control whether or not flame is able to enter or those embers. So pretty new. I mean, it will certainly, if it has an exposure, you'll need to replace it, but replacing a couple of vents and saving your home, well worth it. There's some other systems. So these are 2 gable-in vents. This, again, has that same honeycomb system. This has a baffle design. Like a lot of us have vents over our kitchen stoves, and you might see a baffle design system. So there's ways that sort of block, those embers coming through. And then here's some through roof vents, and they've got a steel wool mesh that's incorporated into them, so it allows for air exchange. So you can get a sense that there's some new technologies coming. These are all being manufactured in California. I don't know any supplier here locally that has them. But these are available, and you can order them online. Since we're in redwood country, I just want to talk about decks. I love decks. I love redwood. There are some particular vulnerabilities that redwood has. And there are some new design installation techniques that can make a difference for redwood. So if you're going to replace your deck, it would be worth understanding kind of what's out there. There's 2 issues with decks. One, we store a lot of stuff on them that tend to be combustible. So furniture, cushions, propane, newspaper, those kinds of things. So I have a cabin, and so I go through summertime. When I leave, all that stuff's off my deck. That's just my standard behavior, especially the broom and those kinds of things. The other issue is that our deck boards can sometimes be a little close to each other, and they fill with debris, and that debris might be needles, it might be leaves, and if embers land on that, it's really easy to ignite that. I mean, most of us know that when we start a fire, we don't start with a 2x6, right? You're going to start with something smaller, but if you've got little tiny things, that is easy to, it's like baby kindling in the process. So Well, what do we do about this? Because if the deck catches on fire, it'll bring the fire to the house. So there's a couple things, and they're relatively inexpensive in the installation process. They're a little harder to retrofit. But if you can replace the connector board with a non-combustible board, that's a nice fix. And then there's great research now to show that if you, on the deck joists, put a foil face tape on top of the deck joists, that'll prevent, when you get an ignition, the wicking along that deck joist and bringing it to the house. And then increasing the size to quarter-inch gaps makes a significant difference in both the air dynamics and how the fire will attach, or how it will continue to smolder and burn. Redwood's great, far better than Trex, has a much better environmental footprint than all these other composite boards. You can put them 24-inch on center, you can build a superior deck than you can to some of these composites. So I just want to promote that I really am supportive of Redwood, but a few small changes can make a big difference. What you'll hear coming out of Santa Rosa is absolutely no decks. That's the mantra that's being promoted. I've been trying to get Humboldt Redwood Company to be on board to help communicate some of this new information so that we're making wise decisions and so that Redwood doesn't get more of a bad reputation just because they've got that Home Depot contract and they've got all this voice right now around decking, but maybe we should talk a little bit more about that. Anyway, so that's the short there. So let's talk about defensible space because, only you can prevent forest fires, right? That's the Smokey the Bear line. But what I've really seen in working throughout California is that people think about defensible space as that issue over there, and it's really my neighbor. Like, my neighbor's not dealing with their stuff, and, if it was only, a place where people were more responsible, but it's really about them. It's not about them. It's about us, and it's about what we can do. And so the way defensible space is designed to work is that if you do have a flaming front coming at you, the fire could be in the tall trees, it could be in the manzanita, it could be in whatever our surrounding vegetation is. But if you begin to create separation between trees, what happens is that the fire will lay down on the ground and then become something that someone can defend against. When you have really tall flame lengths, you can't put firefighters in front of that. So it changes the fire behavior. But our framework and how we thought about this is just about being able to put an engine here and respond to that house. But we know that there's no way humanly possible we can have enough engines to support the number of houses that can be exposed in these events. And an engine can't manage it. People can't manage a fire tornado. There's all these issues. So we've been communicating, I think, some of the right message and not all of the right message. So look at this. This is what is published to look like. And we see that we've now surrounded the house with vegetation. So if you think you're going to have just a flame front come here, you're going to make a big difference on how the fire is going to behave. But if you think you're going to have embers, it passes right over that effort. So most of us need to be prepared for both kinds of exposures. And what I want to show you are some homes that did survive, and they're interesting. So this is new construction from Paradise. Home survival in Paradise went up to 42% post the new construction standards. That's great because it went down. The survival rate in any time period prior to that was 10% or less. So it made a difference, but I think we could make a greater difference. So this home looks pretty modern, right? You can see that there's this moat of grass around it, and you think, wow, they did it. But if you didn't walk up close to this house, you wouldn't see that every one of these windows is broken. And what happened, and you can see on this cushion from the back porch, see all these little burn marks? It was blasted by embers. So these are the embers inside. I found those in the lawn. And what happened is the embers passed over that green grass, no problem, and landed right next to the house. And the house had combustible mulches around it, probably rhododendrons or some woody plant planted under each one of these windows, because that's how we tend to like our aesthetics, right? We want to make sure our house is anchored. We want our foundations sort of protected from our visual approach to the house. And this house, I don't know if it had an engine on it, but it barely survived. All it needed to have is one of those windows crack completely. So we have double pane windows most commonly now. In this case, the first pane cracked, but the second paint survived. But if they're, you know, if that vegetation was any older, it would have been bigger and there would have been a greater heat exposure, and one of those windows would have gone, and then you would have fire inside the house.
So those are the embers.
Those are the
That's
embers.
what's flying through the air.
Well, in this case, that's what was fine. Those are the ones I could pick up. So these embers are probably because the neighbors' houses were on fire, and so they were construction related, as opposed to, you know, leaves and twigs and things like that. But you get a sense that you've got a big hot thing coming at you. When I was in the Coffee Parks, I saw embers the size of 2x4s. There were 2x4s thrown around as those homes exploded. I mean, there was big material being moved. So whatever they land on has to be able to be resistant to that amount of heat and how long it takes for that thing to go out, right? Or to completely combust. So our codes basically have been really silent about what we do around the house. Here's another example. This is car fire. The fire tornado came through not less than a quarter mile on the other side of this. Nice green lawn, stucco construction, new roof. But again, it's dark colored here because all the combustible mulch burned and this vegetation caught on fire. This window is broken. This window is broken. That house lucked out. So what can we do about that? I think the solution is real gravel mulch. No, so I love vegetation. I love plants. The solution in my mind is you put the walkway right next to the house. You get the vegetation out from underneath the eaves, and you pull your garden bed 6 feet out from the house. And then you've created a place where if an ember lands here, it doesn't have anything to ignite. So the framework that we're talking about is really reorienting so that we work from the house outward. We start dealing with our stuff right outside our front door. So a friend of mine said to me, and it's a little terrifying, but if you had stick matches and you lit one of those stick matches and you threw it at your house, and if you weren't freaking out, then either you're crazy or you probably manage the issues enough to the point where you feel like nothing's going to ignite right there. Outside my house, I have rhododendron leaves, I have some combustible mulches, you know, there are issues. I have a lot of cement around my house too, and so I'm slowly working through it. My house, my cabin, I have a totally different framework that I'm working on, and I'm really doing something very different there than in Arcata. But the point is really to become much more aware about what's right around our house, because that's what's contributing to some of the vulnerability when we get these ember and wind-driven fires. So with that, I just want to I'll end with sort of 3 slides. So what does a house look like that survived in Paradise? This is a home that was for sale. It was an older home, but it had been upgraded, and it met the new construction standards when it was upgraded. So it has these new foundation vents with that honeycomb mesh in there. You can see the embers, see the burn marks on this piece of carpet right here. You can see the pine litter. You know that it was under the kind of gutter exposure. I mean, all that material was coming down. Every home around this one was gone within half a mile in every direction. This home stood out because of a couple of things. So it had the new vents, it had gutter guards on the main house, it had a new roof, it had a tall foundation, so it had some separation from the ground. It was for sale. It didn't have the kinds of accumulated junk and toys and things that we tend to have. That made a big difference. The garage was not upgraded, and so the garage windows broke. I don't have a picture of that, but when the windows broke and embers came in, the garage was empty. So it didn't have anything to ignite on the inside. They had new cement sidewalks, you know, around the outside of the house, so they've done a lot of things right. I think this really made a difference in this home. Here's a car fire house. This gentleman built his house in the mid-'80s. He is an architect, and he was very concerned about fire, and he just did all the things that he thought he could come up with without a lot of guidance behind it. But he had cement walkways. He had gutter guards. He had very well manicured around the house itself. There are a number of elements in the way the home was designed that kind of shed heat and shed embers. And he's the only one in his neighborhood. 17 homes burned in his neighborhood, and his survived. Now, this is kind of new stuff. There's not many folks that are trying to do this. I ran into, basically do both the landscaping and the home design. I ran into this house when I was up in the Weed, north of Mount Shasta area, and I think it's kind of on the right path. You can see that they've got these walkways right around the house. They've got use of cement in ways that'll reduce exposures. They've got, of course, all the new vents and all the new construction standards. But they're going to vegetate in here, and I think that's going to be just fine. It's going to be just okay because everything's out from underneath those eaves.
What kind of siding is that on?
Oh, it's some kind of hardy panel cement.
Is it cement siding?
It's a cement siding. But again, the cement matters more about radiant heat. And panels do better than lap siding because lap siding warps when it gets heat exposure, and then you've got ways for things to get inside. Plywood as a sheathing does much better than OSB, and the reason is because plywood is big whole sheets. OSB is all these little things that are glued together, and it doesn't take much to start pulling one of those little OSB pieces out and move a way in. So if you have the opportunity, you're redecking your roof, put plywood on, don't put OSB.
It's like you were an engineer.
So I'll just yeah. He was responding really well, yeah. So just to kind of conclude here, and that is that, when you think about earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, we don't have a fighting force for those. But we have one for fire. And we've, I think, sort of blindly and naively thought that we can fight all of these kind of fires that we're going to experience. And so I think we really have to think about the fact that we just need to adapt and build smarter. That's what we've done with hurricanes. That's what we've done in tornadoes. Talking to the insurance industry, they feel like they've made a huge difference in hurricane impacts, and they've gone to new roofing designs and new systems, and they're having far less losses in the last 5 years as a result of that. So I think we've got a huge opportunity to kind of reframe and accept the fact that fire is going to be part of our landscape, and we just have to figure out how we can let it move through our landscape in a way that's not going to cause great loss to both our property and our lives. And so I think it's a real opportunity to think in a different way and sort of integrate these concepts together. I mean, the exciting part is the new building codes are helping, and we saw that in Paradise. It's the first community that's had a number of homes. It had 104 homes that were built since 2008, since the new construction standards came in with those vents and other pieces. But kind of from a bigger policy place, how do we incentivize upgrading all the homes that are already here, and how do we help those that are in our most vulnerable populations and need some additional resources? And if you haven't paid attention to the PG&E rolling outages that are going to happen, I mean, it's interesting when you think about it. If you're a renter, the notification is going to go to the owner of the utility bill, right? And if you're a renter, you may not get those get those notifications. So, I mean, these are big changes that we're about to experience. And what I heard yesterday is that we should be planning when they roll us out for a 5-day or greater outage. Because they will not re-energize the lines all together. They're going to go substation by substation. And so the likelihood that we're going to experience them, it's not so much about a fire here, but it's probably the transmission lines coming from Highway 36 and other locations, and we will go down. So that's a whole other topic, but one if you haven't paid attention to is worth putting some energy in. And you'll see that basically what's going to come is new guidance around how to manage landscaping around our house. As a result of what we've learned from these events. So, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Any questions out there from Yana?
We got our list. We got a list going. Thank you.
It's a great talk. The warning you've given us. But suppose you haven't been able to do any of the steps that you suggested. Would you agree that what we could do if a fire is approaching your home is hose down as as much as you can, your house, and particularly those vulnerable areas that you were describing? Is that worth doing?
Most of us are gonna freak out when we smell the smoke.
Yeah,
That's the usual pattern, and then when the fire's out, we stop caring.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of forensic activity that happens in that pre-warning period. I mean, the number one responsibility is you need to figure out where you're gonna be safe. So, follow all the evacuation orders, follow all the declarations. I do, at some level, still promote the shelter in place if you're well designed for it, right? I mean, here's another thing to think about. If you're having to evacuate and you're gonna get burned over, do not stay in your car, right? That is one of the most dangerous places to be. Find a home of the newest construction standard you can and get in that house to let the fire front go over. You get out of that house. Your house is not gonna just spontaneously combust, or the house you've just jumped into. But you need to not have skin exposure to flames, and you need to not be trapped in your car. Number one. So don't wait till the very last moment to try to evacuate. I can tell you a million stories of people that waited to the last second, sitting there with their hoses and trying to do these little things, and that's not worth it. But depending on your situation, and like me in my cabin, heck yeah. But I'm not a proponent of sprinklers and sprinkler systems like on your roof, because everyone wants to put sprinklers on the roof. I'll just let you know. If you didn't want to do it, you should want to do it, but it's not the right thing to do. Because the idea that you're going to have enough water available, that you're going to have your redundancy in your system because you might need power to run your pump or to distribute that water, or that you're going to get the sprinkler spray exactly where the embers are going to be. If they're sitting on top of your roof, they're not going to get underneath your vent and underneath in those places. So there's a lot you can do, so I want to empower you to think about that. But do that 2 or 3 days before you have exposure. And I mean, in like the Thomas fire situation, it took 2 or 3 more days for those homes to continue to burn, right? And so if you were in a potential, if you knew that was maybe coming, you could do a lot in those 3 days. Car fire, you could have done a lot in those 3 days. People just didn't believe that it could burn into town. But they had 3 days worth of warning. Randy.
This is really great, and I've listened to you on KHSU, and your programs are excellent. Really appreciate that. So I have a brother that lives in Ukiah in a heavily wooded area, and of course they're evacuating once or twice a year. Is there? I wish he could be here to see this, but is there a central spot like online where people can go to get some of these ideas?
Right there.
A website or somebody?
Yes. So we're trying to do lots of stuff. There's tons of information available. If you Google my name, you can run into really boring talks by me at various different links, so you can choose your pain that way. We have one centralized website right here. So if you just type in UC and fire, you'll run into that website. The Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety runs a website called disastersafety.org with lots and lots of this technical information, and it's well presented. The National Fire Protection Association has a lot of good fact sheets. People come into it at different levels, and depending on where you spark your interest, no pun intended, then you can sort of figure out.
I just want to say, when I listened to you and Hugh Scanlon do the KHSU thing, I didn't realize that the Santa Rosa, the HVAC systems were sucking in the sparks, and a lot of those big buildings burn from the inside out just because I never thought about that. That makes sense once you hear it.
Right. I mean, how you shut your house down and how you evacuate if you have the time. It's closing the windows, it's closing the cat door, it's locking the cat door. It's, trying to keep, if you don't have one of those little strips where your garage door comes down to or really seals it up, embers blow right underneath those garage doors. There's lots of ways that you can get all that stuff sucked into your house or your building. Yeah. Darn that KHSU. Miss those shows.
Any other questions? No. Well, thank you. Thank you for presenting today, and in your behalf, we're making a donation to the Wheelchair Foundation. So a certificate to you, and then I'm going to attach
Great.
where this goes. So thank you very much.
Thank you. grew up in Humboldt County, and our Rotary Exchange Student came from Spain and brought his daughter, and we had a great time together. So it's so cool to see the cultural connection.
Thank you. So one announcement I do want to make this week, we did find out that our matching grant was approved for our initial project. So now that we know what our budget's going to look like, we'll get some plans going and put some dates out for what that's going to look like these next couple of weeks. So I'm going to finish up here with the raffle.
All right. Brandy, you're gonna take it for me. Just give it to you, actually. All right, 880.
Oh, 880.
880. First. And then the next one's going to be, boy, we got two in a row, 881.
Sure you did, Brad.
Did I watched her here?
How come Brandy and Randy kind of goes down together?
Get two fives? All right, well, that was nice. You made it already.
All right. Thank you very much. And everybody have a good weekend. Happy Friday.